Fear is extremely sneaky, and if we're not aware, it has a way of polluting and taking over every single area of our lives. And there's two factors here. There's the more gentle, calm, observant awareness that is needed to notice when fear is speaking and not our true opinion, not our true direction. And then there's the second layer from which we need utter bravery and utter willpower to break through the wall of fear that stands in front of us. So let's go through the first part first. And that is, how do we know when fear is speaking and not what we actually want? Well, it's actually quite clear if you're willing to be brutally honest with yourself, if you're willing to, when you're noticing and when you're observing, if you're willing to acknowledge that one side of the coin is only being protected because you don't want to trigger your fears, then it's quite simple. But what happens is we don't want to admit that we're still giving life to fear, so we just fail to question it entirely. And here's a good practice. A good thing that we can do is when you're deciding, let's say there's two choices in front of you, and you know deep, deep down that if fear and anxiety, if all those things, all these imaginary dangers weren't a factor, the choice would be very clear. But you don't really want to admit it because then you're going to have to do the work of going through the fear. And more so, you're going to have to go through the sort of perspective and perception of yourself that you again lost to fear. Detach from the thing, the moment, the choice entirely, right? So don't make this an important decision in your life. Make it one of those things where it doesn't really matter too much, and let's just call off the decision completely, right? So when there's two choices in front of you, act as if it's a hypothetical. And the hypothetical question is this: among the two choices, among the two paths you have in front of you, if you were guaranteed by the universe that your fears and anxieties wouldn't come true, which option would you select? And this is purely hypothetical. And you have to be purely honest. What choice and what decision are you making? And of course, there might be nuance, and I actually invite you to follow that nuance in this sort of introspection. So, from there, of course, there's going to be two answers. There's going to be the brutally honest answer, which is, oh, yeah, I would obviously select this choice because the only thing stopping me from moving in this direction is fear and is anxiety. And if I had a sure way to know that those things weren't going to come true, I, of course, would take that path. And then there's the other flip side where it's still kind of murky waters, right? You're saying, well, even if fear and anxiety weren't a factor, this is more of a safe option. I probably would choose this one anyway. And that's when fear gets really sneaky because you have to be completely honest with yourself. And if you're not, fear will take over everything because it's going to be safe choice after safe choice after safe choice and not the choices you would have made if you weren't still being held hostage by fear. And then what's going to happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line? We're going to have a life that we, in a way, feel resentment towards. And it's not that we feel resentment towards our choices, we feel resentment towards ourselves. And it's a lot easier to untangle that right now than it is to untangle that way further down the road when a lot of choices and decisions have already been made. Right now, if you're dealing with the fear, it is significantly easier. It'll never be easier than right now. And I want to say one more thing that is, I guess it's as metaphorical as I'll go for this episode, and that is conquering your fear, stepping out of your comfort zone, moving forward despite all the anxiety and all the fear. It's like a drug, right? And it's a good type of drug because it's the type of drug where the present moment starts intoxicating you. Every fear you overcome, you start to see that the drug isn't in doing something different. Well, it is, but I'll elaborate. It's rather in doing something you would have already done if all that mess wasn't stopping you from doing it. So the freedom of doing something, even despite the fear and anxiety existing, that's the sort of intoxication that I'm talking about. And you can only experience it when you actually do it. And the opposite of that is you're going to keep getting not addicted. This isn't overcoming fear and anxiety. There's only positives to it. The negatives is just more of the same type of BS that you've already been experiencing for so long. It's going to keep making its way into different facilities in your life, different choices, until every little area of your life wasn't made and wasn't created in the mindset of excitement, of passion, of exploration, of evolution. It wasn't made in the mindset of all these beautiful things. It was made in the mindset of fear and survival. But those things aren't necessary anymore. The choices that we're supposed to make in fear, the choices that would protect us from the danger of the outside world, those aren't choices that need to be thought about deliberately. It's not going to be a lot of rumination. There's not going to be a lot of obsession involved with those fears. It's going to be spur of the moment, act in accordance with your sort of survival mechanisms. So I think that's the one thing that I want to put forward is the counter argument to what I'm saying is, oh, but what if the fear is trying to protect me? And what I'll say to that is your fear can be trying to protect you, but there's nothing to protect you from when the fear is imaginary. When the danger is imaginary, when the problem is imaginary, there's no solution. And you could say, oh, well, I don't know if it's imaginary or if it's real. Has it happened? Is it in front of you? Can you see it? Then no. You thought of it yourself. And this is the brutal, honest truth. And even, you might get some comfort out of me saying that because you could feel a little bit of this is very common in OCD as well. You're going to feel that reassurance of me telling you that those fears are imaginary, but that's not enough. That's a little taste of the freedom that I'm talking about. The real freedom that comes from actually going through your fear, that's something that can't be given to you by another person. It can't be reassured to you. You need to go and experience it for yourself. You need to break through in the depths of your own fear, your own anxiety towards freedom all by yourself. So what I'm telling you right now, you need to tell yourself. When an imaginary danger pops up, you can say, remember this video and tell yourself, I have two choices right now that I'm faced with this fear right in front of me. And first, I will acknowledge something very important. This danger, this fear, exists literally 0% in reality and has been completely created by my own mind. And it is for that exact reason that I'm going to choose the path and the choice that I want to make completely despite this fear because it is not based in reality. Here's the algorithm. There's two worlds that exist. There's our imaginary world in our mind, and then there's the real world in reality. And when these two worlds are in misalignment, for example, when you're treating your imaginary world as if it's real and you're treating the real world as if it is aligned with your imaginary fears, whatever it may be, this creates misalignment. So now the fear starts to turn into anger. The fear starts to turn into resentment. And then we wonder why. We say, why am I so angry at my life? Why am I so jealous of that person? Why am I so resentful of that situation, whatever it may be? And it's because the fear starts to disguise itself when it's misaligned with reality. Here's a clear example, and that is when you're making a decision, when you make a decision in reality off the basis of an imaginary fear, so you make a safe choice to avoid a fear, a danger that was never actually real in reality, this creates misalignment. So that's when the fear starts to turn into anger, into all these actually very fiery emotions that, don't really take too long to create real suffering. Fear kind of lingers for a while and it's a slow process and it wears you down like a marathon. It slowly creeps into every decision. It slowly affects the way you speak. It slowly affects the actions you take. But then when those actions start to become misaligned, it's like a ticking time bomb. The fear starts to turn into anger. You get angry at the world. And we don't want that to happen. And the good thing is, it doesn't have to happen. In fact, you are more than capable of going in the complete opposite way. When you conquer fear, when you go through fear, it's like going and experiencing ecstasy in life for the first time. especially when you've been weighed down for so long. Trust in reality. Trust in life, even when your heart sinks because of the fear, even when your chest tightens, even when your belly starts aching, even when you start sweating, even when you feel nauseous, even when you have a headache, whatever it may be, still choose through logic. Be practical. Be grounded. The imaginary danger does not have a solution. And if you act in life, in reality, in a way that is trying to avoid an imaginary danger, you're going to you are going to continue to experience imaginary suffering. And the problem with imaginary suffering is that it feels real. It feels real. You know, the heartache is real. The fear is real. The disappointment in ourselves is real. The self-pity is real. The guilt is real. The regret is real. Those things are real, and you need to take them seriously. You cannot let fear negotiate with you. That's what we do. Someone who's at the absolute, I guess, bottom of their hole that they've created, they might go in a way of letting fear basically make every decision for them. They never leave their house. They never talk to anyone because fear is constantly making their choices for them. But then there's the next tier where they start to make a little bit of progress. And this is probably where maybe a lot of you guys find yourselves at because you're trying to escape this sort of module of fear. And that is, you're kind of negotiating with fear, right? You're sitting at the table, you're pondering if you want to make a choice or not, if you want to do this or not, if whatever it may be. And you're kind of going back and forth with fear. Fear says, oh, but what if this happens, blah, blah, blah. And then you say, that's probably not going to happen. And you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like a chess game until finally fear usually gets the best of you. Because when you try to fight fearful thoughts with logic, you're just playing its game. You're playing its game. The point is to not respond to those fearful thoughts. That's the response you need, is no response. Imaginary dangers can't be taken seriously. Fear and the fear of things that don't exist, imaginary problems, stop treating them as if they're real. And I already know there's going to be one specific comment probably. That is, well, there are real things in life to fear. I know there are. But what are the chances you're going to be able to predict them? And if the counter argument to that is, oh, well, I've predicted fears in the past, there's something called selective bias, and it's extremely prominent, especially when we're trying to make excuses for our own misery. If you want to help yourself, do it. If you don't blame the lack of information when it's being put right in front of you. Your brain understands a certain language, and it's called your reactions. There are things in life to fear, but your brain is not a fortune teller and can't predict what tragedy, what horrible thing is going to happen to you. And if you are going about the mindset as if I've predicted fears and they've come true before, yeah, but you've probably predicted thousands of fears, and that sort of little thought crossed your mind before it happened, and there goes the selective bias in which you are excusing and validating your misery. I'm sorry if I'm coming off maybe a little bit more crude than usual, but when it comes to the emotion of fear, when it comes to the trapping and psychological downfall that can be caused as a result of fear, you need to have the sort of tone and the sort of strict voice that I am sort of portraying to you right now. Because otherwise, it will take everything from you. It'll take everything. And you can't let it. And I know as you're listening, you could probably recognize some areas where it's already happened, where fear has already sort of cornered you and left you a lack of options because the only options now have to be void of those imaginary fears. And it starts as one. It starts as one maybe fear that you have, and you say, okay, I can deal with this. I can avoid many of the things in my life, just by playing the safe route and not sort of triggering that fear. And then there's another fear that pops up. And you say, okay, two I can deal with. I can keep avoiding it. If I just avoid that situation, if I just avoid that environment, those type of people, I'll probably be okay. And then the fears start adding up. There's another and another and another. And then they become obsessive. So it's not just that you fear the thing, but now you fear anything to do with the thing because you're not grounded in reality. You're treating the imaginary dangers like real threats. And your brain is operating in the position as if those threats are real. And you can only change the way your mind is operating by withholding your reactions from these fears, by realizing deep within yourself, logically, practically, that these imaginary dangers and fears are not real. They are not real. And this is why people suffer. Because what is needed is the realization that I've been talking about this whole episode. And not just that, you need to go through and withstand the emotional turmoil of going through those fears. You have to be willing to face that. You have to be willing to feel that discomfort. And not only that, notice all the choices and decisions that you're making in order to not feel that discomfort. So not only are we avoiding anything that solely relates to our imaginary fears, but now we are avoiding anything even in relation to the topic because we don't even want to experience the discomfort of having to either face it or avoid it. So now we're living further and further from our most empowered, present, confident self because we keep letting fear dig us deeper and deeper and deeper down into this mental, imagined world of how we think reality works. And there's a saying, I'm sure you guys have heard it before, and that is everything you want is on the other side of fear. And I would say that's true. And I would also add to that that everyone, sorry, the type of person that you want to become is through fear. So there's no way around it. The fear is the lesson. The obstacle is the path. Whatever gets in the way is the way. This is how you become your best self. This is how you align with your highest reality. It's not even by overcoming fear. It's by going through it. There's no necessary overcoming this that is going to feel like some sort of destination. There's always going to be fear that pops up, and it's how we deal with it right at the moment. Right now, focus on conquering and overcoming whatever it is that's in your life at the moment. Any fears that are holding you back, any single one, conquer them. There's no reason not to. What's the point? Why live with fear when there's a way out? When we know that the brain can reconfigure itself through our experiences and through our choices and actions. That as we face our fears, the fears and the emotional turmoil that they're associated with start to lessen to an extremely great degree. What you want is in the fear. It's in it. The emotional state, the freedom that you're looking for, it's in the fear. The fear is acting like a casing for that energy that you've been looking for. The very things that you are avoiding are the very things that are going to give you that edge that you've been looking for, give you that presence again. That's it for today's episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to leave a link in the description. If you guys want to read my book, I go into topics like these and a bunch more. But other than that, thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, thank you for listening as always. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.